Welcome to another epic edition of Barbecue Season Drinks Coach. Thanks again to Julian and Sandra for their garden. In the last show I did Cahors, one of my favourite wines in France, possibly at the top end, the most underrated and most refined and sophisticated and age-worthy red wines in the whole of France, in my opinion, and they deserve more credit, so go back and have a look. There's some crackers there, and one was available down in Majestic for a tenner, which is amazing. Right, what I did say was that I would allude to making a special on my favourite grape variety in the world, probably. It's one of a few. Cabernet Franc. So this is Cabernet Franc in some of its guises, not all of its guises. I did look around in various retailers trying to find bits and bobs, and I think we've done quite well. There are one or two stars that may be slightly missing, but I'll try and allude to those where we can. Cabernet Franc. What's Cabernet Franc? Well, you've heard of Cabernet Sauvignon, haven't you? And you've heard of Sauvignon Blanc. Well, back in the day, around the time of Charlemagne, Charles the Great, we're talking pre-First Crusade, so we're going back to like 10th century. Vineyards were planted in Bordeaux, and they were planted by a group, a nomadic but highly intelligent race of people called the Franks, or well, I don't know if race is the right word, but the Franks, which travelled across Europe, settled in the southwest of France, and that's where the name Cabernet Franc comes from. It's the Cabernet of the Franks, and it was one variety, and that one variety was planted quite intensively in the whole area of Bordeaux and just slightly above, where it's better known actually in some cases, in the Loire Valley. Also, if you think about it, with many, many hundreds of years of global warming, etc., it's probably as warm in the Loire Valley now as it was in Bordeaux then, maybe much warmer. So, Cabernet Franc, what happened to that? Well, Cabernet Franc then mutated into other varieties. It had children. It had Cabernet Sauvignon, very blackcurranty, very concentrated. It had Sauvignon Blanc, the polar opposite. White, crisp, green, fresh, zingy. Some people adore it, some people hate it, but you can't deny its refreshment, and in warm tropical climates like New Zealand and increasingly in Loire, makes the most deliciously passion-fruity, refreshing white wines. It's also capable of making some very big, badass, oak-worthy wines in Bordeaux too, that age for 20 or 30 years effortlessly. Also, there's a variety which is kind of like the run to the litter, if you like. There was Cabernet Sauvignon, Sauvignon Blanc, and there's Carmener, and Carmener ended up being the variety of Chile. It turned out all that he needed was a lot of sun. But Carmener, of the three children of Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Sauvignon Blanc, and Carmener, is the one that retains most, I think, of the Cabernet Franc characteristics. So what we've got here, well, we've got a South African wine, which isn't 100% Cab Franc, by the way, but a fun wine nonetheless. And we have two wines from the Loire, two of the most heralded regions in the centre of France for making straight Cabernet Franc. And we have a couple of Argentinian efforts as well. So let's start off without mucking about. This wine is called Alphabetical. The reason why it's called Alphabetical is it's made by a group of people. It's imported by a very successful wine company called Swig. Shout out to Robin and Damon and everybody else there. And this wine was bought in my local wine merchants, Phil Glass and Swigget. It's a £15 touch, actually less, I think. Very, very interesting wine. And it's called Alphabetical because it was made up from wines from both warm climates and slightly cooler climates to produce a complete everyday drinking wine. It literally says on the front, Vin Ordinaire, which just basically means glugging red, right? In South Africa, why can't they call it Vin Ordinaire? And they have. And basically it's made up of so many different grape varieties that somebody once joked, well, you've got almost the whole alphabet in there. So this wine is now called Alphabetical. But this particular cuvee, 2019, when I looked up on the website, is mostly Cabernet Franc, which is what we're talking about, and Merlot, and probably a whole bunch of other stuff. Probably no oak, but really, really good quality fruit, which actually, when put together, jigsaw together to make a really orchestral, satisfying, gluggable red. So let's see what we've got here. Why did I include Cabernet, South African Cabernet Franc? Well, I was desperately trying to find one of the good ones. There are some really very special editions out there. Warwick Estate makes some extraordinary Cabernet Franc. My favourite, Willem Pinard, if you watch this, is the wine from a place called I think it's called Sondagskloof, or Sundays Valley, which is a good 2-3 hours drive into a cooler area just south of Cape Town, southeast of Cape Town. long way away from Walker Bay. And Sondalskloof has a particular winery, which Willem Pinar is head winemaker for, which make extraordinary wines. They're very Bordelais, I think, and he makes a straight Cab Franc, which is a kind of like the black sheep of the family. So they call it Zwartskap, which means black sheep, basically. And it's 100% Cabernet Franc, and the producer is called Hermanus Petersfontein. Yes, that's all one word. Imagine trying to write that as an email address. So now it's HPF rather than having to write Hermanus Petersfontein. .za or co.za. So Hermanus Petersfontein making amazing wines. The 2015 was extraordinary. When I tasted it, I think I told Willem that it was the Pomerol of South Africa, and I stick by that. He tells me the 2017's even better. And if I'm honest with you, I was waiting for it to arrive to taste so I could put it in this lineup. Hasn't arrived yet. I'm just take it from me. It's an amazing wine. Lathwaite sold the 2015 for about £25. £25 is quite a lot of money, but on Christmas Day with a rib of lamb, it's going to be absolutely amazing. Okay, fantastic. Right, so here we are with another South African wine from different vineyards around the Western Cape. So it's been plonked together, made from lots, and produced into a consistent style. So nice bit of colour to it. Nose has some of the characteristics already which I associate with Cab Franc. Cabernet Franc very often has a smell quite exquisite, I think. You either like this or you don't. But when you open a Cuban cigar out of a tube and you smell the unlit tobacco, there's a wonderful, warm, licoricey perfume of the unlit cigar. And Cab Franc often encapsulates that. It also has a smell sometimes which is just verging on kind of vegetal. Which is probably down to a chemical called methoxypyrazine, which we've talked about in the show before. And it's kind of the taste of a red pepper, but kind of slightly greener than that, kind of somewhere between a green and a red pepper. And that kind of chili, peppery smell, tomatoey smell, often comes up in Cabernet Franc as well. But also, if it's really ripe, and let's face it, South Africa's no slouch at the sun, it's really chocolatey as well. So it's sort of dried cocoa powder note. So you've got all of the above in here. It doesn't not help that it's got lots of other varieties in it too. So that's 14.5% alcohol. It goes down the throat like it's made from foam. It's so easy to drink. It's scary. What's wonderful about Cab Franc is the versatility it is with food. I mean, even a warm climate Cabernet Franc like this, if blended properly, would be fantastic with barbecued salmon, which will go on there in about 10 minutes. So let's leave South Africa for now. But just to say, South Africa makes world-class Cabernet Franc, as do Washington State around Seattle. Not specifically around Seattle, but there is actually wineries on Vashon Island who bring the fruit in right across the states from Walla Walla. If you go to the finest valleys in Washington State, Sierra de Cheval, Yakima, Columbia, they have some most incredible Cabernet Franc, and again, they compete very highly with the finest wines, certainly in California, if not the finest wines in Bordeaux. Where am I missing? New Zealand. New Zealand also has fantastic Cabernet Franc, particularly around Hawke's Bay, particularly on the shallow gravel soils, which they call the gimlet gravels. So, moving into a different country, we've now got two very fancy, well, sort of fancy pants Cabernet Franc wines. We've got one here from Chinon. I think Chinon, Chinon, has always been the most prestigious red wine district of the whole of the Loire Valley. If you go along the Loire River, it's peppered with wonderful Cabernet Franc districts. Saumur Rouge makes great red wine. We've got another one here, actually kind of one that's slightly upper level. Saumur Champagny as an appellation, which is just south of the Loire, makes poetically perfumed wines, quite delicious. I like to think of them as the Cru Beaujolais of the Loire. Chinon tends to be a bit more dense, a bit chunkier, slightly riper towards the Bordeaux ripeness. They can age for 15, 20 years beautifully. And they're fantastic with lamb chops. Man, the lamb chops I had in the last show with Cahors would have gone very well with this. So 2 lamb leg steaks are going on here for me and the wife. Thanks very much. Then after that we've got Saumur. This by the way was bought from or was actually donated by Davies Wine Merchants in London, and the price is £14.95, £15 for a premium Chinon these days from a top vintage. I know this is a top vintage because I checked earlier. It's 2020. Absolutely delicious wine. 15 quid is certainly worth a Sunday lunch, isn't it? Absolutely brilliant. and it goes with everything: lamb chops, chicken. It goes amazingly with even with sushi. I've tried Cabernet Franc sushi and it works very well. This wine. This is kind of a different kind of play. This is from Domaine de Vieux-Pressoir, one of the most prestigious wineries in the Saumur. And as far as I know, they also make some very, very fine white wines. And it's from the newly described Saumur Puy Notre Dame, which is kind of like this is Saumur, but this is Pimp My Saumur. This is up there with Chinon and the other famous red region, which is Saint-Nicolas de Bourgueil. So Saumur Puy Notre Dame has kind of made its play, and Saumur is now seen along with Saumur Champagny, Chinon, and Saint-Nicolas de Bourgueil as equal superstar terroirs and sources for making these wines. This wine was also responsible for Saumur getting its appellation in the first place. So they've always been the vanguard of improving people's perceptions of what's available there. Saumur also, you may have seen in other shows, makes fantastic sparkling wine. It makes beautiful dry whites from Chenin Blanc, both unoaked and oaked. It's a treasure trove of really cool wines, especially now things have got a bit hotter in the world. So thank you to all those people who drive V8 cars, because our Saumur is so much better for it. So there we are. This wine's from 2015. Really, look, check it. From my chum Nick Darlington, whose business has just merged with another business to create Graft Wines. He has the most extraordinary wines. Nick has taken a risk on certain wines and certain producers around the world who produce some very, very funky and unusual and odd tasting, in some cases, wines. But he will take up a variety nobody's ever heard of, or a country that people didn't know made wine, or even a wine that locally is frowned upon, but he thinks is fantastic. It has energy and power and life. And Graft is one of those companies. So look it up, Graft Wines, on the internet, and you'll see the most extraordinary range of crazy shit. And this wine is 2015, a super, super warm year. He's still selling this wine. And actually, when we come to it, you'll see that there's much more development in colour in the bottle, much more colour in the glass, and it's silky as hell. I feel like I might want to put it in the fridge for 5 minutes or so, and I might well drink that instead of the other with my barbecued salmon. I bet that's going to be a fantastic combo. Moving on, you've seen this before a while back when I talked about the launch of this range. This is called the Found range from Marks and Spencer's. All wines under a tenner. This wine's $9.49, I think. It's one of the more expensive ones. But it's a range of about 12 wines which are slightly different to the norm, that deserve more of a play. And the wonderful winemakers and buyers at Marks and Spencer's, in this case Belinda Kleinig, who was responsible for the wonderful Shiraz we drank a couple of shows ago, she's found this Cabernet Franc in Argentina, and I'm very, very pleased about it, because when we talk about Argentina, all we talk about is Malbec. Malbec, yeah, Malbec. And some of the wines are very nice. A lot of them are big and oaky and jammy and a bit simple, a bit stupid. And if a region becomes super famous, then there's always lots of fairly average wine coming in underneath. Sure, the top stuff's great, but pay peanuts, get monkeys. You're probably paying 15 quid to get a half-decent Malbec from a good producer in Argentina these days, in my opinion. There are exceptions. There are some wonderful big brands, in fact. I'd even say Trevento, which is probably the largest Argentinian Malbec brand, owned by Concha Toro, the largest wine company in the world, is a completely legitimate wine. And their Reserve Malbec 2019 is a tenner and is perfectly good wine, perfect steak red. But Cabernet Franc, there's a lot of Cabernet Franc grown there as well. In Argentina, there's Cabernet Franc, and believe it or not, a ton of Tempranillo, which is the grape variety which they make Rioja out of. But you never really see Tempranillo banded about. So I don't know what they're doing it. I don't know if they're burying it in dodgy, unmarked graves, or they're just putting 15% of it into loads of Malbec so you don't see it. But Tempranillo is a great thing. They should be shouting about it. But they are finally talking about their Cab Francs a bit more, which brings me on from $9.49 to, I think, about £13. And this is a cracking place to finish in this lineup. This is DV Catena Vineyards, Catena Alta, which are their top cuvées, are the kind of the vanguard of super premium wines in Argentina. The famous wine writer and wine communicator Tim Atkin, go check his website out. It's full of amazing content. Tim Atkin invited me round to his house for dinner. We drank Nicholas Catena 2001. I don't believe he's got any left. It's a £50 wine, fair enough. It's probably a lot more than that now, actually, because it was some years ago. But I tasted it. I thought it was Las Cases. Now, Las Cases is a tippity-toppity tip wine from Bordeaux. A 2000 Las Cases would be about £300. And it was 50 quid. So, I mean, you know, when you say it's value for money, it is value for money. It was one of the most extraordinary red wines I've ever drunk, and I couldn't believe I got it so wrong. A wine from the high altitude vineyards of Argentina was, I thought, from one of the most famous, or the most famous wine region in the world. So, this is 13 quid. This is now a wine which they've released. I think 2017 was the first time I saw it. This is from 2018, and 2018 is a miraculous vintage in Chile and in parts of Argentina. It's an absolute cracker. And this wine at £13, 100% Cabernet Franc, really shows what Argentina can do with this variety. It's a complete wine, and is the perfect steak wine too, which is the reason why, along with the lamb leg steaks and the salmon, there'll be a nice little ribeye on the side there to go with this little cheeky monkey as well. So, we've tasted this one. Nice, spicy, light, but high in alcohol, 14.5. I think that's the highest here. Let's try the Chinon. Let's have a look at the colour. Well, the colour's got much more of that kind of purpliness, I suppose, because it's much cooler. The pH level, the acidities are higher. What we call the pH is much, much lower. So the wine has a much more bluey purple colour, and it sort of looks fresher and cooler, really. 5 minutes in the fridge and some Edam cheese, and that's a banger just right there. Incredibly effortlessly balanced for a Chinon. Normally Chinon has a bit more tannin, needs a bit more time to come round, but that's like drinking a Brouilly or a Morgon or a Fleury. Check my Beaujolais shows. Gosh, that's nice. I think Emma's gonna love that one. Just keep an eye on how purple that wine was and the colour of this wine now. So this wine's 4 years old. Look at that. Oh, you've got proper garnet hues to this wine now. It looks polished like an old French oak table. It's got some dark, sweet colour in the middle, but the outsides are really showing some maturity now. This wine is starting to show kind of almost cigar colours of brown and edges. It almost looks like maybe the wine would be too mature to drink. I'm surrounded by flying ants. I think it's going to be a thunderstorm later. We shall see. Right. Oh. Okay, the first thing it smells like is... It smells like a Cru Bourgeois Medoc. It smells very, very Bordelais. If I didn't see the shape of the bottle and I smelt this wine, I'd immediately be thinking, is this claret? And it has a lot of the ripeness, the cassis, the black currantiness, what the French call goût de capsule, which is the taste of this is the capsule, which used to be made from lead. It used to have a funny smell. We call it kind of cedar box or pencil shavings. You know, when you shave a pencil, there's that kind of slightly dusty, wonderful, warm woodiness. When you get that in this wine too. So this is made from the top grapes, top vines in this 50-acre estate, slightly bigger than. Unbelievably smooth, ready to drink, absolutely delicious. Nick, thanks very much for sending this to me. Yum, 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 yum. Right, I need to get some food on the barbie. Okay, look, Marks and Spencer's, we've seen this before. I did say when I first tried this that I liked it, but I thought the wood was a bit obvious and maybe it would settle down over a couple of months. Well, that was 3 or 4 months ago. Was I right? Almost definitely. Most definitely. You don't have that kind of charred, vanilla-y, oaky adjunct. It almost tastes like something that had some vanilla added to the wine. It was a little bit gawky, but that was only because the wine had just been bottled. This wine has now settled into itself. It's got a beautiful, vibrant colour. This is under a tenner. It's got a driven cork. It's 2019 vintage. I have no doubt whatsoever that if you kept that for another year and a half, it'd be even better. Ooh, lovely sort of fruit, pastel fruit, baked cherries, like a sour cherry cheesecake. It's got some wonderful tang to the fruit, vibrancy. Lovely bit of herb in the background. Yeah, tenner all day long. Before I fall over, last but not least, DV Catena Cabernet Franc Historico 2018. Buy this. This, you know, if let's say you're a student and £15 is quite a stretch, or 15 quid is sort of politically and principally as far as you'll go on a bottle of wine that you're just getting drunk on, buy this and tell me you don't like it. I want people to tell me what you think. This is an absolute banger. It's one of the best red wines on the high street right now. Look at the colour. Very, very dense. Oh, magical smells. Spicy, cinnamon, nutmeg, baked plums, mulberry. When it hits the palate, it just drenches the palate in red fruit like a summer berry cake. And there's still some grip there. This wine's got time. Stick that in the rack for 5 years, see what happens. See you next time. See you next time.